It's not calling you Josh Frydenberg, it's calling you Dosh Frydenberg.
Under the coalition, taxes for hard-working Australians will always be lower.
You know, I don't hold a hose, mate, and I don't sit in control room.
They're answers that only can come from Victoria, I'm afraid, because that's not my job.
But I ain't spending any time, mate, because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person was torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
Well, g'day, listeners, and welcome once again to the Two Jacks. It's episode 122 today, recorded on the 7th of August 2025. And joining me, as usual, is Hong Kong Jack. G'day, mate. How are you?
Well,
I got some photos from a mate. Very heavy rain in Hong Kong yesterday, I think. No, it might have been Monday.
Yesterday, and we've had 3 black rain signals. And you get a black rain when they think the rain will fall at 70 mils an hour or more. And we had 1 at the weekend, and then 2 in 24 hours, which that's unusual. You normally get 1 or 2 a year. To get them so close together is quite unusual. And yes, it was very, very wet indeed. I think we had 300 mils in a day here at in mid-levels.
Well, yes, my mate sent some photographs through showing a lot of flooding. He was he was in a cab and very, very proud of himself to make his way all the way from his home to his office. It looked like the cabbie might have got caught in the flood, but he soldiered on.
He was an unusual person who bothered to go to his office on Tuesday because almost no one did. It was the place was deserted.
Well, yeah, okay. So he's accepted his own. Congratulations there. In Tasmania, we have a government form now, Jack, after the election provided no clear majority. The Libs will form the Greens have indicated that they will not move a motion of no confidence in the Tasmanian Premier or his government, which means a period of relative stability.
Yeah. The Tasmanian Premier, I think he's got about 14 votes and needs 18 to be a majority.
Labor 10.
Labor 10 and 4 Greens. So they're on about the same level, which means that neither of them can form a government without assistance of other people. And no one's actually got that at the moment. So he did what you would expect him to do, which is to go to the governor and advise her to commission him to form a government, which she did. I think she went a bit beyond sensible comment, but you don't think so?
Oh no! Look, she basically told the Premier that he had to go back and test his numbers on the floor, which is
which I don't think she can do. I don't think she can do. She can say, I'm going to commission you to form a government. When and how he tests his numbers is a matter entirely for him and for the Parliament, who can force him to test his numbers. But it's not for the governor to be deciding when numbers are tested. That's not her role.
This is Governor Barbara Baker, an Australian barrister and former judge.
Yeah.
I don't think she did much wrong, and I think what she said about testing the numbers on the parliamentary floor was nothing more than stating the obvious.
But he may well not do that. He won't call a motion of no confidence, or he'll just sit back and, if Labor want to do that, let them try. But he won't.
It would be a very, very bad move for Labor to do that. And as I said just this morning, the Greens have indicated that they will support the Premier on the floor of the Parliament, at least in relation to no confidence motions. Labor had a disastrous campaign.
The governor seemed to be deciding that she would commission the government because of the importance of incumbency, and that was somehow in her discretion. That's not really true. She's duty bound to follow the advice of the existing Premier.
Yeah, but I mean, and she did that in offering him the opportunity to form government. I don't think that's particularly controversial. But anyway, they have a government there. Labor played their cards very, very badly and lost significant support among the electorate. I think Labor will be sitting back and licking their wounds substantially. They will not want to go to the people anytime soon. But but certainly the preconditions exist for another election sometime soon in Tasmania, but there is no appetite for it among voters or parliamentarians.
They could make them a 6-monthly event.
Yeah, and that's going to make people. You got the sense that Tasmanians were pretty unhappy with going back to the ballot box on a regular basis. So I think the Premier is safe for now. I would expect him to be safe for at least the remainder of this year, Jack.
Yeah, and it's different in Tasmania, to be fair. The number of parliamentarians for the state is very high. The parliamentarians are people who everybody knows.
Yeah,
and sees at the local supermarket. This is not, you're not like where you're hiding in the anonymity of a city the size of Sydney or Melbourne. This is, they know who you are and they see you around.
Machete crime in Victoria, all the news. In fact, I just checked this, Jack, and there hasn't been any news really about machete crime for some time in Victoria. But you said Alan's got a brilliant idea to combat machete crime.
Yep, she's going to put bins outside of the police station so that the miscreants can pop along to their local police station and slide the machete through the slot.
It's a little bit like an amnesty. It's a little bit like a firearms amnesty in that it will be an offence to carry or possess. It is now under the legislation, and people can, in fact, just hand their machetes in. I wouldn't expect a lot of people will be, but those things, something like providing a bin for machetes might seem a bit silly. But again, I looked at when was the last machete outbreak, and there was basically a roll of them around the Northland shopping centre for a while. Nothing since. I think Sky News did a story on it a couple of weeks ago, but the last reported machete offence was in May of this year. Not saying that that's because of the government's legislation, but perhaps we just saw a flurry of these things and then not much since. The Bridge March, Jack, in fact, there were big numbers in Melbourne and Sydney. In Sydney, of course, they took over the bridge for a while, which caused a lot of people to wring their hands and fret. Very, very wet in Sydney on the Sunday. But I think they claimed about 90,000 people there.
I'm not an expert on crowd numbers, but it looked every bit of that.
Probably would have been bigger without the weather. Did notice some photos taken there. We saw the former WikiLeaks boss photographed. I think that was in Sydney. First time I've seen him out in public for a while. And fortunately, he was snapped standing with a group of other VIPs with a photograph, I think, of the Ayatollah Khamenei in the background. Didn't look great, Jack.
Bob Carr was amongst that lot as well, I think.
He was in there too.
No, it never looks good. I don't get excited about this, but then I didn't get excited about a bunch of Nazis walking past a women's talk rally either. That just happens sometimes. You can't.
Well, they didn't walk past it, Jack. They stood on the steps of Parliament and zig-heiled their way across that particular protest.
But that's that.
I think we should always be a little bit unsettled whenever, regardless of the context, when we see Nazis storming around town. In full balaclava masks and what have you, and zig-heiling their way. I mean, Victoria's got a problem around that. You must acknowledge that it seems to be the state is the is the sort of foundation for Nazis in Australia. And I suspect a lot of it comes down to policing. We did have a group, what do they call themselves, the National Socialist Alliance, come up to Sydney. Many of them Victorians come up to Sydney. They jumped on a train on the North Shore, and by the time they got to Central, there were a whole heap of coppers waiting for them. And issued them with move along orders. In Victoria, nothing happens. They just sort of wander out, do as they please, and then wander off again. I mean, in New South Wales and in Queensland, for that matter, too, they have zero tolerance around Nazis, and I kind of like that approach.
That's been going on in Victoria for a very long time. That's why it's always had its historical roots there.
Well, no, when you look at the rise of far-right groups in Australia, basically studied this at university, there was a sort of foundation was in Sydney and perhaps more recently in Queensland. But I think the pandemic has rattled those numbers quite significantly. And now we do have this dedicated number of idiots who pretend they're not Nazis, but actually are.
There was no shortage of them in the 70s, 80s and 90s, as far as I can remember. In any event, I don't get excited if, I don't think people who organise a protest can police everybody who attends that protest. It's embarrassing for the people who are standing in front of a photo of the Iranian leader, but so what? Yeah,
I mean, look, there are these things done quite a bit. I think some of the protests from the farmers in Victoria have led to politicians from the Victorian Liberal Party standing in front of some pretty ugly signs. And, of course, we go back to Tony Abbott and members of his party room standing in front of posters that referred to Gillard as a bitch or a witch and all this.
Ditch
sort of
the witch, I recall.
Yeah.
By the way, the Ayatollah photo was far from the worst thing that was displayed at the march on Sunday. There were Hezbollah flags. There were flags from some of the Afghan Islamist groups, all that sort of stuff. There's plenty of it going on.
Yeah, I think when you get to these sorts of protests, there's often criticism of police afterwards that they've allowed things like Hezbollah flags to be flown and these sorts of things. Police have to make an assessment around manpower and resources on when to wade in. And if they are going to wade in, they know they're going to get a fair amount of reaction from the crowd. And that means putting their officers at risk of physical harm. So I never understood why the police cop all the sort of criticisms and claims of being politicised. What they do is make an assessment of a crowd, and they would wade in probably pretty much at the only sign they would do that is if someone was being harmed within the crowd. Other than that, they just let them go, and I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah, they just got to be consistent in the way they go about it. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen no issue around policing at all. I mean, when there was a group that protested outside the Opera House in the wake of the October 7 attacks, and it was a pro-Palestinian rally, and we heard some fairly unpleasant anthems from the crowd, or sort of group chants and all that sort of stuff, and the police were, sort of criticised for not wading in and making arrests. I just, they've got to make an assessment about their own officers' health and safety before they decide to wade in.
I saw a video at the weekend of a part of the crowd chanting "Death to the IDF." The organisers.
What do you expect should happen?
The organisers of the march can't do anything about that.
They can't do anything about it, and nor should police intervene.
Personally, I think let people tell you who they are.
Yeah, I got no problem with that either. Well, one person we certainly know who he is Gareth Ward, member for Kiama, and still a member for Kiama, and still drawing a parliamentary salary despite sitting in a jail. I presume he's in Silverwater. That's where you go first in New South Wales. Gareth Ward last month was found guilty of sexually assaulting two young men aged 18 and 24 at his home between 2013 and 2015. The context of this is really interesting, Jack, because the Liberals dropped Gareth Ward in the seat of Kiama, famously known as one of the most livable parts of Australia, Kiama, lovely part of the world. But the good people, the denizens of Kiama, actually voted him in as an independent member. And now the New South Wales Parliament has got to figure out what they're going to do with him. And
what they can do with it.
Yeah, well, it's very, very difficult. I was talking to a former president of the Upper House, Meredith Bergman, who said it's actually almost impossible to remove a parliamentarian unless they want to go, Jack. And Gareth Ward's not resigning. He's enjoying his, $380,000 salary? I think $280,000, I should say.
Yeah.
As a member of the
there's not a lot of incentive for him to go because he stated he's going to lodge an appeal and he will say, pending the appeal, I shouldn't have to resign. And there's an argument in that. Normally speaking, embarrassment would make you resign and go away, but he's already done all the damage he's going to do to his reputation, so it doesn't really matter.
Yes, as Chris Minns, Premier Chris Minns said, he's got no shame, and that would seem to be the case. I did read in the Australian that there were a number of cases where parliamentarians had been expelled, and they mentioned 5. The only one I could find was an MP back in, I think, the 20s, where he had made obviously some fairly defamatory claims under parliamentary privilege against a minister, I think, of transport, that led to the implementation of a Royal Commission, which subsequently found the remarks that the MP had made were without foundation. And the Parliament moved to expel him, and they did expel him, and that triggered a by-election, which he went on to win. So he was back. He was back in no time. I don't know of the other examples. Meredith only mentioned that one to me, and I looked into it. It is an appalling situation all the same. One of the things that I'd have to say was quite appalling was that when he was convicted, Gareth Ward, basically bail was extended. Now, that stayed in place for about 2 or 3 days before he was taken into custody. But it staggered me that he was given bail, Jack, after his conviction by jury.
Yeah, I noticed that it happened, but I wasn't in court to hear why. I'm not suggesting for a moment that the judge got it wrong. There may have been good reasons for it. I don't know. But I don't know what they are.
Ultimately, I mean, it's just an unfortunate thing that there's certainly a perception and may well be reality that high-profile people who commit sex offences are treated perhaps with kid gloves, Jack. As I say, Ward's bail was overturned and he was taken into custody, I think, with 3 or 4 days after his conviction. And that's where he languishes now. And you would have to say that there is a very real prospect of a custodial sentence, and quite a long one in his case. But it's very hard to get rid of him.
He wouldn't have had his bail revoked unless there was a probability of a custodial sentence.
Oh, absolutely. He'll do a big jail. I don't think we can. I don't think we'd have to worry about that. I mean, he's essentially been convicted of rape on 2 occasions, so he's going to get a holiday, and it'll be a fairly long one. But yeah, it was re-elected by the people of Kiama. Maybe Kiama, beautiful place, part of the world that you are. Maybe the people of Kiama need to have a bit of hard look at themselves as to why they re-elected this freak. Have you seen him? He looks like an albino, Jack.
He looks pretty odd. Perhaps they should wander down to the blowhole and have a think, do you think?
Yeah, I think they need to do that. The other thing that I wanted to tell our listeners, Jack, is that after an event in the New South Wales Parliament, I went for a drink and at a nearby bar, and I looked up at the bar, Jack, and who would I see other than Mr. Ward, Mr. Gareth Ward, MLC, I think. No, well, he's a member of the Lower House.
MLA.
MLA, yes, thank you. And in heated conversation with Bruce Learman.
Oh, okay.
Well, I have the photos to prove it. And then Ward stormed out. I wasn't privy to the nature of the conversation, but Ward stormed out. And I thought, there's a couple of nice blokes having a chat and a beer together.
There's endless opportunities for a bit of fun with that, is there not?
Yeah. So
just before we leave Australia, we've lost two very interesting people this week. David, who, like you, used to work for the evil. I mean, listeners, not only does Jack from Sydney work for the evil Murdoch empire now, he used to work for the almost equally evil Kerry Packer empire.
Only briefly.
Yeah,
David
he was writing for the art magazines there, I believe. And I think David Dale was there in your time, wasn't he, at the Bulletin in Park Street?
Yeah, I was never at the Bulletin. I was in magazines of lesser repute than that.
But, art magazines, yes.
Yes. Blue collar magazines. But David Dale was a highly regarded journalist, and he's passed away.
He was mid-70s, I think.
Yeah, 77.
Yeah, very hard. I always found it very difficult to skim past a David Dale piece, whatever he was writing about.
He had a great gift with words, and of course, most famously, was sacked by Kerry Packer after he had a blue with him.
He was trying to institute an annual thing of writing the 200 worst people in Australia. Unfortunately, in his 200, there was always several friends and business acquaintances of Mr. Packer, and he took a dim view of that.
Yes.
And Cole Joy, who was almost 90, I think.
Yes. And Cole Joy was a sort of pioneer of pop music in Australia in the 1960s.
Yeah. Not only was he a success himself, but he formed a management and production company, and they acted for a lot of the sort of the rising stars. They found a lot of the talent that made it in Australia.
Two great Australian cultural icons, and it bears some reflection on what the Productivity Commission has referred to, Jack. And we'll deal with this as an issue next week. But the Productivity Commission has advocated that there essentially be no that AI companies should be allowed to access artists' work, whether they're musicians or writers or whatever they may be, and not have any sort of form of compensation, which the Australian is quite rightly up in arms about. I noticed that Zuckerberg, in his latest AI metamorphosis, helped himself to I can't remember, 800 million books, Jack. They like books rather than news pieces. And they decided they were going to lift that. You can actually put your book title in if you've written one and find out if it's been lifted. In my case, two of them had been by Zuckerberg, who just decided he was going to steal it. Sort of fair rights. We'll talk about this more extensively, but you're much put upon artist in Australia. It's hard enough to make a bloody living, and then when you actually create content, some mega billionaire to come and swipe it off you and not give you any sort of royalty or any sort of remuneration. We'll look at that next week because
I saw that Peter Garrett's getting involved with this. Not only did he be the lead singer of a great rock band, but he was one of the few rock stars that I've ever spoken to who saw it very early on as a business and was very determined that they should run it like a business, and they all made a fair bit of money out of Midnight Oil.
Yes. Well, look, it will be something that causes considerable controversy. As I say, we'll deal with it as an issue next week. The Productivity Commission report is on productivity as one of our themes of this podcast. And in order to boost productivity by something like 4%, it's decided that you just let AI go. Now, I know it's a completely different subject, but if you went back 25 years and said, let's just let social media go, let's not regulate it, which is essentially what happened, and now we have all these problems with social media because they've been allowed to enter into an unfettered, unregulated market. And I don't know that it always comes out with good outcomes, Jack, but that is something for next week.
We can talk about next week. I do notice that Jamie Dimon, the head of JP Morgan, they basically gave AI access to 200,000 of their employees to use at work, and they say hugely successful. Productivity through the roof, all that kind of stuff. But I haven't read everything about that.
Well, in the case of Zuckerberg, it'd be nice to know if he's going to steal your stuff before he does it.
Yeah.
And obviously monetize.
Or to get a check when he does.
Yeah, exactly right. And to monetize it and make money from his AI platform. I can't remember which manifestation it is, but yeah, and they will make considerable money out of that, even though it's free, open model. Enough of the bleeding, but I do see a number of scribblers and artists, musicians, etc., sort of getting up in arms about this. Travelling with kids, Jack. You've got a comment there from someone who travels about a bit and doesn't like children, by the sounds of things.
Yeah. This was on all over social media during the week, and the person says, "I'm staying in a hotel in Switzerland. Just had breakfast next to an English couple with one child, probably age 5. He ate his breakfast watching an iPad on the table in front of him. I know this topic is a dangerous one, but when are people going to wake up how wrong this is?" And I kind of chuckled over my morning yogurt and berries when I read this. Well, I'm a great believer that one of the things we've gotten wrong is not having family meals like we used to. I think they're a really good thing, family meals and discussions. But how do people like this? And this is a sort of a theme on social media.
The first thing offended. The first thing I'd say to this bloke is mind your own business. Right?
Yeah, how can you possibly know what's gone on in that family's morning?
Exactly right. It's one of those things you can be as critical as you like as an observer of people, but you have no idea what's going on in their lives at any particular. No. And there's you get this sort of moral panic about kids with screens and all this sort of stuff. Mind your own business.
Or kids who are having a full-blown tandy in the supermarket or something. If you've never had, if none of your kids have ever done that, well, I don't know what sort of kids you've had,
All right. Well, while we're on the travel theme, we do have a letter from a listener, and we did discuss a couple of weeks ago the issue of pilot mental health, which had led to a spate of airline crashes, including the most recent one, the Air India crash, where all but one souls were killed after a crash where it's not just pilot error; it's a deliberate act on the.
So it would seem.
To crash the plane. So it would seem that seems to be the likely case in the Air India crash just a month ago. So I'll just make sure I've got this fellow's name right. It's Gary from Tasmania. That's what he wants to be known as. He said, "I listened to your latest chat with Hong Kong Jack, and the issue of pilot mental health came up. I thought this was relevant. Seems it is a topical issue, as in the US, the regulator, the FAA, seems to be very oversensitive to pilots with any history of counselling and cancelling their licence, which can take years to get back. And this week there was some legislation introduced federally to address that, but don't know how it's gone." He provided a link to the legislation. He said, "I'm not actually a commercial pilot, but used to fly gliders here and heard about this issue from friends in the United States. So now that this is a problem, we're probably looking at areas of trying to solve this by identifying people who, just had gone to a counsellor. So that's a bit of an issue.
If you start doing that, if you say, well, if we find out that you've been to a counsellor, we're going to take your pilot licence away, people won't go to a counsellor when they need one.
Yeah, that's right. It's just ridiculous. These sort of prevention schemes will be ridiculous if they're just looking at people who are at least have identified and acted on a mental health issue.
Yeah, I mean, lots of people have temporary problems with mental health issues, but are perfectly capable of carrying on in their job. By the way, I don't know, I'm not making any comment on the Air India case, but there have been earlier cases where I don't think it had much to do with mental health. It was just sheer bastardry on the part of the person who did it.
I think if I'm thinking of the same case, that it was a relationship breakdown too.
Yeah, and the Cairo, the Air Egypt one, looked like some sort of religious motivation.
Yeah. So if you're a pilot and you are thinking about crashing a plane with 300 or 400 passengers on board, I suggest you heading off to a bit of counselling is not going to change very much. That you are probably a sociopath.
Yeah.
Excellent news today, Jack. I know you probably won't know a whole lot about this, but we can actually say that people who suffer from ME, which is myalgic encephalomyelitis, otherwise known as chronic fatigue syndrome, been very poorly treated in Australia and elsewhere. And more than 100,000 Australians suffer from ME/CFS. 4 out of 5 are women. It's a chronic pain condition. It's not just tiredness. It comes with a whole range of symptoms, including light and sound sensitivity issues, lack of appetite, which can, in extreme cases, lead to death by malnutrition. A really awful condition, and there's been a bit of a revelation around a study. Look, just to give you an idea of these numbers, we don't know in Australia how many people have got ME/CFS. The estimates vary wildly from about 120,000 to about 400,000. Most of the people I speak to say their numbers are around 180,000, but there are problems with diagnosis. And so now we're actually getting very close to being able to identify this. There's been what's called the Decode ME study, a collaboration between Edinburgh University, ME charities and patients. It was launched in 2022 to explore whether genes play a role in who develops ME. I'll call it ME. For the latest work, researchers analysed 15,579 DNA samples from 27,000 people with ME and more than 250,000 people without the illness. And they have identified a genetic predisposition to this, Jack, that it is actually... They talk about the 8 genetic regions that stood out in people with ME/CFS contain genes involved in immune defences and the nervous system. It will take more work to unpick the biology, but some gene variants may make people more vulnerable. And I'll just go on to quote. This is Andy Devereux-Cook, who's a Decode Me co-investigator, said, the vast majority of the patient population essentially has been abandoned in one way or another by families, the government, the medical system. This will be huge for the patient population. Even though it does not provide all the answers and it does not provide practical assistance, it is a welcome drop in the ocean towards turning the tide. And what they're actually saying, or what Andy Devereux-Cook is saying, is that medical science particularly has been negligent in this respect, is that people with ME/CFS initially, as a result of a psychiatric group in the UK grabbing hold of this condition and saying that essentially it was psychosomatic. This is in the 1990s. ME had been discovered well back in the 50s, Jack. And The results of this test now show that it is a neurological and immunological condition. It is not psychiatric. It is not psychosomatic. So that's the first advance that we've got, an absolute confirmation of this. And then we get into treatments that sort of have flourished from this, psychiatric control over ME/CFS. People who have a ME/CFS more often than not will suffer from PEM, which is post-exertional malaise. That is that they are being told to get off their asses and run around the block and then run around the block twice the next day and all this sort of stuff. And it's absolutely devastating to them that it will exacerbate and accelerate the symptoms. So where they can be suffering moderate ME, once they go through this graded exercise therapy, they end up being very severely affected by this. I know about this because I've been writing about a woman who's had ME/CFS for 30 years. So the GET therapies are still being recommended by the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners. So GPs who may not know and they won't have any specific training about ME will consult with their RACGP handbooks, and if they've got someone who's come across their desk for the first time with ME/CFS, they will tell them, firstly, you've got to go through cognitive behavioural therapy, which says you've got a fake illness and you need to change the way you think about it, and then go and do this graded exercise therapy, which will almost certainly make their symptoms worse and accelerate the condition from moderate to severe. We still do it. The RACGB still does it. The UK has changed their treatment methods. The US has changed their treatment methods. The RACGP, in its handbook for general practitioners, its members, was revised, I think, last year, and still has these old therapies that have been discarded and misused. The woman that I've been studying, she went through, very, very active person before she got ME. She went through this. She threw herself into these graded exercise therapies, 2 of them, in fact, and ended up much, much worse. So if you know someone who has ME, firstly, understand that they do not have a psychosomatic condition. It is a determined neurological and immunological condition, strictly medical, physiological, not psychiatric. And secondly, that they have been subject to appalling medical negligence over a long period of time. And hopefully now this is going to come to an end. All right, we're moving now on to the Mideast.
This, by the way, is how medicine works. There's a lot of guesswork and a lot of trial and error.
No, it's a little bit different, Jack. Quite seriously, when in the early 90s, when ME was determined, there'd been CDC studies. There was a study done in the first decade of the 21st century in the UK called the PACE study, and it was deeply, deeply flawed. What I'm saying is that these are sort of women's illnesses in almost in considerable respect. There's 4 out of 5, etc. The shrinks got hold of it. And basically said, to all of these women, mainly women, you are suffering from a psychosomatic illness. And that really has its history in sort of Freudian diagnoses of hysteria, Jack. It's when medical science doesn't have answers, what's been happening is there is a presumption, rather than listening to patients, the psychiatrists take it over and say, well, there's something wrong with you mentally. And that's the problem. So that's where the failure of medical science has been. That's where it started. Over to the Middle East. We've got a question here. Should Israel have left Gaza in 2005? A little bit late to be musing on this, Jack.
No, I just think there's a whole lot of interesting questions about what's happening over there now.
Well, the history of it was that as part of, I think, the accords during the Clinton era, Jack, that Israel had through negotiated settlement had established Gaza as a Palestinian state under its control in 2005.
I think it was a unilateral decision to leave.
Right. And I think Hillary Clinton has been the one who said, now look, Israel gave the Palestinians the keys to Gaza, and rather than set about and we're talking now in 2005, rather than set about building hospitals, building schools, doing these sorts of things, they were basically spending money on rockets from Iran.
And building tunnels. Yeah. Yeah. And the reason it's an interesting question to ask now is that what happens next?
Yes.
And you look at what Gaza looked like in 2005 and how it was going. Not brilliant. And then you say, well, what are we gonna do next in Gaza? What's going to be allowed to happen in Gaza next? Are there lessons to be learnt from from 2005 in the last 20 years, 2005 to 2025?
Well, I did actually look at some photos the other day of Gaza in 2021, Jack, and these are photographs. You can't tell. You can't see tunnels. You can't. But it was Gaza City was a vibrant place. And looked to be well settled. So October 7th has changed everything to the point where now Gaza City is just little more than rubble. So these sorts of issues that you're talking about is, should there be a ceasefire, or some people are calling it a peace fire? Hamas are still active there. We know this. Hamas are certainly in the frame for a lot of murders around a lot of deaths around humanitarian aid being handed out. That they are seeking to control that so they can ramp up prices of basic foodstuffs around Gaza and take the profits as their ill-gotten gains. So we know Hamas are there. In fact, Jack, we've got a statement from senior Hamas politician Ghazi Hamad. Where was he speaking from, Jack? Would he be speaking from Qatar?
It didn't have a date line, but I'm pretty sure he's not speaking from Gaza.
I would think not. He said the initiative
and it won't be Saudi, and it won't be Egypt, and it won't be any of the other Gulf states. It's going to be
Qatar, isn't it?
Yeah.
He told Al Jazeera the initiative by several countries to recognise the Palestinian state is one of the fruits of October 7. Why do all countries recognise Palestine today? Before October 7, was there a single country that dared to recognise the state of Palestine? Just give me one example. Well, without wanting to go on with the nonsense, Jack, the Palestinian state, two-state solution's been on the books for most Western countries for 40, 50 years.
Yes. Yes,
so I don't know that I'm accepting what Ghazi Hamad has got to say about this.
No.
So, if he's saying that, well, I guess what the insinuation of what he's saying is that now this has become more likely as a result of October 7 and the Israeli response. And I suppose that's true.
Yeah, well, I think it's a self-congratulatory thing. As I listened to it, he thought, well, this is what we achieved with October 7. We've now persuaded people, Western leaders and Western countries, to support recognition of a state of Palestine. So it was the underlying reason being that it was worth doing.
How would a two-state solution work? And right now we're hearing at least reports of Netanyahu saying that Gaza will be cleared of human, if it's human population, which is, I would suggest, a fairly bold move because there's only one way to look at that, and that is ethnic cleansing. But that hasn't been confirmed yet. how would that work? How would a two-state solution work in the Middle East?
Who would run it?
And obviously Israel is under Netanyahu. Is I mean, if he's going to remove Palestinians from Gaza and place them in some other part of the Middle East, that would amount to ethnic cleansing by every definition of it. And then, do they return? Is Gaza just going to be another walled area that is, sort of strictly under the control of Israel?
So that's one possibility, right? Then you have some kind of internationally protected Arab state, Palestinian state. Who runs that?
Yes, and that's the question. It can't be Hamas. Is it the Palestinian Authority?
And what's his name? Abbas is 21 years into his 4-year term, I think, at the moment, is he not?
Well, that's essentially the effect of Hamas in Gaza, isn't it? To destroy all other political opposition to it.
Yes.
There were the days of Fatah and others. They're all gone. So, yes.
And this is why we haven't had a two-state solution. The reason why Arafat rejected the peace deal that Bill Clinton brokered together was because he knew that if he signed up to that, he would face the same fate that Anwar Sadat faced in Egypt. That is, he would be killed.
Yeah, so, how does the Palestinian Authority work without the intervention of some sort of peacekeeping force, some sort of overseeing force that presumably would be stuck there for decades?
Who would trust the Palestinian Authority to run a state?
Oh, you can see a hell of a lot of violence occurring there. Let's just, as a hypothetical, let's say that there's a French contingent that goes in there with military capacity, but essentially in the business of providing humanitarian aid and reconstruction or overseeing it while it happens. So you've got a French peacekeeping force there, and they would come under fire at any given time.
Yeah. Arafat's daughter is worth $8 billion.
Oh, we've talked about the Qatar connection with Hamas and Hamas's billionaires that have now pretty much all been assassinated or killed. And when you look at Hamas billionaires, the only thing you can conclude is that they have been ripping off aid and profiting from it all the way to distributing food at inflated prices to Gazans. I don't know what the solution is. I don't suspect there are too many workable solutions.
No, but
I don't think the world is going to. I don't think the world will accept Gazans being physically removed from Gaza, Palestinians in Gaza.
Nor do I think they would accept that, and nor do I think it will happen. But I guess I look at it at the moment and it's saying there's no particular magic to a ceasefire, and there's no good solutions.
No, I guess there may have been opportunities in the past, but none of those opportunities are making themselves available now. That the Israelis are hell bent on these disputed areas, settling in these disputed areas, which is in direct contravention to the Oslo Accords. And then you've got Hamas still active. I mean, what do we do there, Jack? Do we just leave them? Do we leave them active, or should Mossad move on them? I mean, I think the business of aerial bombardment is not an effective way of removing Hamas.
No, I don't think it is either. So I just think there are no. I mean, ceasefires don't have a great record. I mean, the peaceniks love them, but they don't have a great record around the world.
Well, a ceasefire is a good way of basically providing humanitarian aid. And we know, we talked about this last week, that forces within Netanyahu's government from fairly extreme end of the right wing end of the spectrum. They're basically all in for ethnic cleansing, and if that requires a bit of be done by starvation, let it happen. What I think, and this might sound like a sort of Western peacenik stuff, but Israel it must have an election soon. It's not one due until next year, and there needs to be an election of some sort in Gaza. Now, it can't happen today or tomorrow. I mean, they need to deal with the humanitarian issues and that are there. You've got people starving to death there. I said 8 people starved, literally died of starvation yesterday in Gaza. That was reported, and the more you look at this, the more you think, well, how are you going to? What's the architecture of a peaceful solution?
Yeah, that's what I say. I think there are
I don't think there is
choices.
one.
No, there are no good choices at the moment.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, people think that there are good choices. I mean, the Irish president, which I really loved this week, the little garden gnome with the weird hair, came out and he thinks there needs to be military intervention under Article 7, I think, of the United Nations Charter, which rather amused me because he's talking about everybody else's sons and daughters being put at risk, not the Irish ones. There are only 7,000 members of the Irish Defence Force, so they won't be going.
Well, it would require some sort of coalition peacekeeping force.
And it would be a thankless and dangerous job.
Thankless and dangerous job, absolutely. And also because groups like Hamas are chaos merchants, they will shoot them down. They will. There'll be guerrilla warfare, suicide bombings, all sorts of things going on there around that peacekeeping force.
And quite honestly, I think if you had an election in Gaza today, they'd probably elect Hamas.
Well, that's part of the response to October 7, Jack. We've now created a generation of Gazans who despise Israel, who may have carried that in their DNA anyway, but now they would think that they have good cause for hating Israel.
Well, I think there was a generation of Hamas supporting Israel hating Gazans before October 7. That's why October 7 happened.
Yeah, but you would understand now that understand now that the battle lines have become even more reinforced.
Yeah, history would say that the way to solve this is you either leave them in place or you destroy Hamas. You make it impossible for Hamas to operate there. That's what history's. Yeah,
but again, doing that by aerial
no one
bombardment,
wants to do that.
Doing that by aerial bombardment is not only ineffective; it's going to exacerbate the humanitarian crisis there. I mean, surely there's a role for Mossad there now that Gaza is essentially on its knees. I did see there's a piece in the BBC today that Hamas are still paying their bureaucrats, their public servants. They're paying them 20% of their wage. I'm not sure where they're getting their money from. That is Hamas, but the BBC interviewed a number of, I guess you might call them Hamas public officials who have to basically race off to try and get their cash. There's no banking system in Gaza anymore. Have to go out to a Hamas place and pick up their pay every week. And there's IDF around and all sorts of dangers involved.
So where's the money coming from? I think Australia just tipped some more money into UNRWA, didn't we?
Well, it may well come from there, Jack. I mean, we've also, discussed this too. Ehud Barak has made allegations that Israel, the Israeli government, provided more than $1 billion US dollars to Qatar, knowing that money would go back to Hamas.
Yeah, I think that's entirely possible.
So, I mean, it's really dark stuff. If that would indicate, well, this is what Barak is alleging that the Netanyahu regime did this in order to create and fund an attack like October 7, so they could in turn crush the Palestinians in Gaza, and that's kind of the way it's played out. Now we don't know whether Barak's.
I don't agree with that, and I don't agree with that characterisation.
Well, that's what he says.
Yeah,
that's what he says.
Well, I didn't. I watched the interview. I didn't think that. I thought it was entirely possible that the Israeli government was prepared to fund Qatar, prepared to fund Hamas as a counterpoint to the PLO, to the Palestinian Authority.
It hasn't really worked out, though, Jack.
No, it hasn't.
It's been a disaster,
and there's a lot of things that have been done in the Middle East that don't work out.
Yeah. Well, we've looked at Cameron Stewart, right?
And the next thing we do might be another one that doesn't work out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could go back to 47, 48, Jack, and maybe that's the genesis of all of this. So Cameron Stewart wrote in the Australia that the Palestinian Authority, we've talked about them, would be that they would take on some sort of leadership role in Gaza. As it stands, their strength is in the West Bank.
Such as it is, they haven't got much strength there.
There's not much there. In fact, there've been some strikes on the West Bank, of course, from the IDF. So we've got a large group of countries, including Australia, who are saying that they will recognise, well, they are involved in the recognition of Palestine as a state. And, yeah, it seems to me to be premature at worst, Jack.
Yeah, but personally, I don't think that there is any of the institutional structures within the communities there to have a Palestinian state run by Palestinians. I think the only viable alternative is to have someone else come in and run it.
Yeah, and acknowledging that is a risky proposition.
Yep.
All right.
I think that's the least worst alternative. If you believe in a two-state solution, you're going to have to find someone else to run the other state.
Yes, indeed. Now, you've asked the question, should the UNWRA have a role in Gaza?
Yeah, well, my answer to that is no. I think they're beyond saving the UNWRA.
It is definitely true that and it's pretty much been confirmed that of those incursions into Israel from Gaza, some of them were led by members of UNRWA.
Yeah.
So, and more comprehensively, they are hideously compromised in terms of their relationships with Hamas.
Yeah, and what's gone wrong, it's even more fundamental than that. What's gone wrong is that UNRWA was formed, I think, in 1949 to look after all of the refugees, Jewish and Arab, from that conflict. It's long Israel's been looking after the Jews ever since. What UNRWA has been doing is it's allowed organisations like the Palestinian Authority or Hamas to say, we're not going to do any of the slog work of providing schools, hospitals, etc., etc. UNRWA is going to do all that for us, and we're going to take our share of the money and just spend it on rockets from Iran and building tunnels and all that sort of thing. So it has done more to create the current problem than any other organisation.
All right. Well, there are some fairly extreme views there. You've quoted Glenn Reynolds, who's otherwise known as the Insta pundit. I think he's a law professor at Oklahoma?
Tennessee.
He said, I don't believe any ceasefire would hold, and I think Israel needs to keep killing Hamas and its supporters until there is abject capitulation and a marrow-deep dread of any future conflict on the part of the defeated. That's how you get to peace.
There are there is a considerable body of support for what I would call the 1945 view of this. That this is 1945, and the only thing we can do with the Nazis and the Japanese is defeat them.
Yeah, I did see this, and I don't know. This is not Instapundit, but I'll just quote it. This is the only country, he's referring to Gaza, in the history of modern warfare. And the first thing I'd say is that Gaza is not a country. This is the only country in the history of modern warfare.
No, he's talking about Israel.
Oh, he's talking about Israel. This is the only country in the history of modern warfare that has fed the citizens of its enemy in a time of war. We didn't do it in World War II for the Germans and the Japanese. Hell no. We didn't do it during the Korean War. We didn't do it during the Vietnam War. We didn't do it in Afghanistan. We didn't do it in Iraq. I could go on, Jack. But that's
not exactly true. We did actually feed.
Absolutely.
We did actually feed the enemy in Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan. In World War II.
In World War II, there was Operation Chowhound, Jack. These are famous things. Operation Manna. I mean, this was airdrops of food in what's known as the Netherlands famine of 1945-46. And this was food drops in 11 days prior to the end of World War II. There was a program called Government Aid and Relief in Occupied Areas established by the United States, which was about providing emergency aid, primarily food, to occupied nations, including Japan, to combat starvation. I know he's saying, during wartime, but, it's the same thing. I mean, these guys, they just, it's not as if they won't learn from history because they don't fucking know it. I mean, they just don't understand it. That's why it sort of bothers me. That's that sort of stuff. And you're quite right. There have been aid programs. You can say that there were aid programs going into Afghanistan well before the Taliban were there from intelligence agencies in the United States. I mean, it's just not right. In fact, I look at some of the CIA's, and I know this is not food aid, but the CIA were very active in the 50s in promoting American culture. So they would actually fund artists, symphony orchestras, all these sorts of things as a way of saying, look at our cultural heights and then look at the Soviet Union. There's kind of a role for this kind of soft power even in intelligence agencies.
Indeed, the Soviets are doing the same thing.
Yeah, to a degree, but this is one of the things. The CIA basically just... artists like Jackson Pollock, they were essentially CIA funded.
Yeah, that's why the Bolshoi ballet used to come on.
And it was in direct response to that. But the New York Symphony Orchestra, for example, would go on tours of Western Europe that was CIA funded.
Yeah.
And it's not dark or horrible or anything like that. It's just simply saying our system's better because we have this. Anyway.
Every country in history, every large empirical country in history has done this sort of stuff. They always project their soft power.
So this is just now relating to these more recent developments. This was reported in the Jerusalem Post, and with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reached a decision for the full occupation of the Gaza Strip, including operations in areas where hostages are held. The Prime Minister's office conveyed the message to IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Ehal Zamir, said, if this does not suit you, then you should resign. Hamas responded to the reports about the intent to conquer Gaza, saying Israel's threats are repetitive, worthless, and have no influence on our decisions. Yeah, you don't believe that will happen, Jack. And I don't think the world will allow that to happen.
No, I don't. There's been no announcement of that, and I don't think that will happen. I mean, what I will say is I don't think Netanyahu will keep his job beyond the end of hostilities or beyond the next election. Golda Meir was a kind of a revered prime minister in Israel, but even she lost her job following the Yom Kippur War in 1973 because it happened on her watch and she didn't see it coming. And in Israel, that's enough. You're finished.
All right, moving over to the United States, Jack. DOJ and Tulsi Gabbard have made allegations that the Obama administration had, well, I think Tulsi Gabbard was using words or using terms like brought a coup against Donald Trump after he was elected in 2016. Can I just give you a little bit of background on Tulsi Gabbard? She's obviously she's Democrat, she's a sort of peace-loving Democrat. But she was also involved in a cult, Jack, and it was an Hawaiian-based cult. I can't think of the name of the founder, but it was a sort of spin-off of the Hare Krishna movement. And he basically became this charismatic leader of this particular cult in Hawaii, of which Tulsi Gabbard, her mother and father, were members. And in fact, when she was elected to the House, she had a history of political engagement as a Democrat. She worked for the Hawaiian sort of council, state authorities, and I think one of the island councils before that. But when she was elected to the House, she called this cultist, this cult leader, her mentor. You got to say, firstly, what the hell are Democrats doing putting this person forward? And now she's now working for the Trump administration. Jack, not so long back, like I say, she's not a Russian. If she's not a Russian plant, in your own words, she'd do until one came along. There was an appalling incident where she was interviewing two Syrian teenagers who'd been badly burnt in an airstrike in Damascus as part of the Syrian civil war. It was clearly either Russian aircraft or Syrian aircraft. And there was a translator there, and Gabbard was actually trying to tell these girls that it wasn't the Syrians, it wasn't Assad's Syrian Air Force, and it wasn't the Russians. It was probably ISIS. And the translator said, "Look, I had to stop translating because I just wanted to end this and get these two girls away from this crazy lady." And then she also said that that Assad's chemical attacks in a region in Damascus was a false flag event. Like I say, she was just spouting Russian stuff really from day one around Syria. So now, after being told by Donald Trump that he didn't agree with her in no uncertain terms on Iran, she's decided to buddy up to the president and say, well, there was this terrible conspiracy. And I don't know how Matt Tiabi figures this out, but a lot of this stuff just doesn't bear any kind of historical analysis, and it's less than, well, it's only a decade old. And obviously, there was Russian interference. That much is known. I mean, how did Hillary Clinton's emails get hacked, Jack? How do we know? Do we know about that? Do you know what happened there?
Oh, I've got no idea.
WikiLeaks did the dump, and it went straight to Russia. But that much is known. And so that caused her a great deal of consternation, because in these emails from the DNC, there were talk about how they'd suppressed the other candidate, Bernie Sanders, and allowed Hillary Clinton to win. It was hugely politically embarrassing, but that was all Russian stuff. WikiLeaks Russia via WikiLeaks stuff. So all this stuff was kind of known. And then on October 17 of 2017, the CIA prior to the election had said there had been Russian interference. And then on the 17th of January 2017, the intelligence agency said, yes, there has been interference, but no, it has not affected the vote count. And that's it. That's all they're talking about here. But instead, it's Barack Obama getting arrested and all this sort of stuff. I mean, it really does look like, hey, everybody, let's look over here so we don't have to wonder whether our current president is a pedophile.
I can tell you who does look worried. I've been watching Brennan do the rounds of the TV, the friendly TV people, and he looks exactly like somebody who thinks he'll be the one thrown under the bus. So I don't think any big conspiracy will be found, nor will anybody be charged with it. But I suspect they'll throw somebody under the bus, and he looks like he's fearing it's him.
Can I just remind people too that the Mueller investigation, the appointment of Mueller was done by a Trump-appointed Deputy Attorney General, Jack. You know, that happened in May. I mean, it's like these things, it's like people don't realise that the rest of us have got calendars and can look back and say, well, we know this happened there because this was reported, this happened there, this happened there, this happened there, this happened there.
Anyway, there's my early tip for you. I think Brennan at least looks like he thinks he'll be the one, and I'd be surprised if he's not.
What's he been accused of doing, Jack? I mean, well, we know what he's been accused of. He's been accused of trying to bring the Trump stage a coup. If we ignore the sort of florid language, that is sought to, I guess, diminish the authority of the Trump administration in 2017 onwards.
They'll charge him with lying to Congress or something like that.
Yeah. Well, going on the number of convicts in the Trump administration the first time around, I guess he's looking at a hard 14 days inside, Jack.
Yeah, probably.
All right. Going to be very, very difficult to prove, and not very difficult to prove. It just seems to be insane. Now you've got a little bit of some voting data here saying that.
Just before we leave that, I saw an interview with Trump where he reminded the interviewer that at a rally after his first election victory, when the crowd were chanting lock her up," referring to Hillary Clinton, he said, "No, we shouldn't do that. She's the wife of a former president, et cetera, et cetera. I think this is bad for the country." I think that was the right thing for him to do.
That was election night. That was. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was election night. He spoke moderately then.
And it was on a few occasions after that. He says, "No, I'm not going to have her charged for these reasons."
Now he's posting an AI video of Barack Obama being arrested in the Oval Office, Jack.
And I think what he said and the reasons he gave post the first election were correct, and I still think that would be the better approach. And I don't think, but I can see why he doesn't want to do that, because he feels that same approach wasn't taken to him, and I don't think it was. But I still think he was right first time. That this is bad. That you don't want outgoing. You don't want a new administration running around charging outgoing administration people with charges.
This is Trumpism writ large. This is just going to happen. So right now he's got a bigger problem, and that is the Epstein files, I should say, and that is just not going to go away. Basically, Democrats and Republican members of the House Oversight Committee have sought subpoenas from basically every attorney general you can think of, the Clintons, a whole raft of other officials looking into what happened with the Epstein files. It just means that's going to bubble away. I think the last one to be deposed will be Bill Clinton in October. So that's another 3 months. You've got a Democrat and a Republican who have sought to petition the Congress to release sought to petition the House. I think they need 218 or 216 more signatures, and there are 212 Democrats there, so those numbers wouldn't be hard to achieve. And that will bring on the discussion about releasing the Epstein files. I just think he's handled this so badly, he may not have much to worry about, although there are some concerns that Trump in his bad boy years in the 90s in particular might have been extremely bad. But he may not have much to worry about, but he keeps giving life to this thing. He keeps trying to kick it away, and it's just not working. So he's got his base that's really upset. They can't understand how Pam Bondi was sitting in February, sitting at her desk while interviewed on Fox News and saying, "It's on my desk right now. I've got the Epstein files." Then we get to May, and the Wall Street Journal says that the Attorney General advised, Pam Bondi advised Trump that he was named in the Epstein files. We've heard further issues where FBI agents have been called in to remove or redact his name from the Epstein files. And, there's also
to redact all of the names, not just his.
Well, I'm not sure about that, Jack.
No.
I read that. We got an attorney general who actually advises the president that he appears in the Epstein files. Now that itself is verging on corrupt, and then you've got you've basically got the base who just won't accept that this can be shut down. So these things are going to be released some way or other, and the embarrassment and humiliation for Trump will continue.
50% chance they'll get released, and who knows where it'll end up if it's allowed, if it all runs its course. Who knows?
Well, one thing
I've got no
we
idea.
could
I've
tell,
got no
Jack,
idea
one thing it'll be pretty clear. I mean, why are they talking to Ghislaine Maxwell and not Epstein's victims, and indeed Maxwell's victims? That would be a pretty good starting point for an investigation, wouldn't it?
Yeah, they can do that. I
they
just
haven't done that.
I've got no idea where this would all end up if it all comes out. No idea at all.
Right now, you've got him trying to wave it away, and it's just not working. And they almost should make if there's no great risk for Trump. I mean, the document dump that came in January 2024. You mentioned, I think, the last show, the time before that the Democrats would have weaponized it had they known. Well, the documents were all sealed until January 2024, and then they were released by the DOJ. It mentioned Trump, but not in means not in any way indicating that he had been involved in anything untoward. Clinton was also named, David Copperfield, Michael Jackson, all these people were named, and then basically the Trump administration had re-released that stuff as new material in February. And then when asked to bring this stuff down, it's one of those things, Jack, where the cover-up looks to be worse than the crime. Mm. And so that's the problem for it.
So you think he should just open the books and let everyone have a look?
Well, if he's got nothing to worry about, just chuck it open. Who cares? I mean, if a few Republican figures are named, so be it. If we saw Trump saying, "Well, Bill Clinton went to the island 28 times." That's not true. I mean, not from what we know on the flight logs. Neither Trump or Clinton ever went to the island. Prince Andrew, he's the other one who's got to sit pretty quietly through all of this too, because he is all over the place. And look, let's just let the chips fall where they may.
But the two that are fairly immunised from any future harm about this are Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, because everybody thinks they're bits of grub. So it's going to have to be something pretty remarkable to hurt them.
No, and there are all sorts of impediments towards prosecuting a president serving or previous.
Yeah.
But,
anyway,
but I would think Prince Andrew got a little bit
to be worried about. His reputation's already gone. It doesn't really matter.
It doesn't really matter. But and there may well, because there are in fact other allegations within the Epstein files, as we understand them, that go beyond Virginia Gieffer's allegations.
But it's all. I'm struggling to think of an allegation that could actually harm Bill Clinton or Donald Trump.
Well, there was one allegation that he was that a young girl, I think 16, performed oral sex on him, with Epstein sort of guiding Trump towards a room. And apparently, according to that allegation, there was a witness beyond Jeffrey Epstein. Now, what does it get to, Jack? Do the Marga Brigade go, well, pedophilia, it's not that bad, I mean, are they going to rationalise it? Because I don't think you can.
Well, I just, like I say, I would be staggered if it does much harm to Bill Clinton or Donald Trump.
I'll do a lot of Trump, a lot of harm to Trump because he basically just carry him through the midterms with something that's basically shackled to him. As I said to you last week and our listeners, he will be judged on in the midterms. He'll be judged on the US economy. Essentially, that's the way it will go. But if he's shackled to a scandal that he can't really remove himself from, that causes all sorts of problems too. So these are political problems, not legal ones. Anyway, very briefly, mate, the Dems. When we look at Pew Research, shows that 18 to 29-year-old men is plus 44 for the Republicans and plus 49 for 18 to 29-year-old women. So the Dems have got a problem with young people.
These are swings from 23 to 25. And you look at that, the Dems have got a problem with men particularly, and young men, importantly. And personally, I blame Tim Walz. There's a poor choice as a vice presidential candidate. The more blokey he tried to look, the more unconvincing he was.
Yeah, I mean, look, we also looked at some polling last week saying that the Trump show was pretty much well and truly over in terms of electoral response. The big issue is really how the Dems going to get independent voters, and if they just sit around expecting them to fall in their laps, they will fail. Look, again, very briefly, Jack. Texas is trying to pull the old Joe Bjelke-Peterson gerrymanders, and the Democrats fled, I think, to Chicago. Arrest warrants. These are Democrat parliamentarians, members of state Congress, and had arrest warrants issued for them by the Texas governor. They're trying to pull a gerrymander which could give them as much as 18 additional seats. And the California governor has turned around and said, well, you do that and you won't win a seat in California.
Yeah, I was most amused at the Massachusetts rep saying, we're going to fight back. Unfortunately,
not much point doing that.
Unfortunately, it's already 9 Democrats, 0 Republicans, despite a 35%
I was going to say,
vote.
Is there a Republican from Massachusetts? No, there is not.
No, there isn't. So it's already done. If you want to have a good laugh, have a look at all the maps for places like Illinois and New York and Maryland. The gerrymandering that goes on in the US is absolutely comical. I've been enjoying this just because I think it's healthy for the country every now and again to see all of their political class right across the aisle, both sides, with their pants around their ankles looking foolish.
All right. Now, we just wanted to touch on the show. We want to get stuck into our sport, but Media Watch did a bit of a takedown of a Sky News episode, which had got millions and millions of viewers on YouTube, Jack. And look, they identified, that is the Media Watch people, they identified this video made by a TikToker by the name of Carla Efstratio. She hasn't got much of a background, Jack. I know you're red hot on immigration as a major issue in Europe, but she had overstepped the bounds of good journalistic practice on a number of occasions, and Sky News took the video down.
I've got no complaint about her. She's some bird on TikTok. I couldn't understand why Sky News ran it.
It's a good question, isn't it? Because it was ugly stuff. I mean, these things, there is a sort of tinder dry nature to the social pressures in Europe right now. And if you see these things are not helping, particularly when they're based on falsehoods.
There's a bucket load of very interesting material produced by reputable news organisations across Europe that details the problems they're having. I couldn't work out why Sky News would choose this particular TikToker's views to amplify.
Yeah, on a TikTok, Jack and Media Watch did pull this out. She was walking around a pro-Palestinian student protest, I think in Sydney, but I could be wrong. And she said, I swear it smells here. There is a definite stench. I feel like I'm getting rabies just being here. So, And also, she made a number of claims that were not using old footage and claiming it as new. They talk about sort of mass syringe attacks, and that was a sort of hand-wringing exercise of about three years ago. Anyway,
but if you wanted to find out what's going wrong with immigration in Europe, you could absolutely stick to the mainstream news organisation and find lots and lots of stuff that would fill up your program about that.
Well, Spain actually, I don't know if it was in response to this, but Spain has actually turned around and said, look, you look at our crime rates. Our crime rates are down. Violent offending's down. Murder rates down, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got all that sort of stuff. Anyway, Sky News, once I think Media Watch did reach out with some questions, and then Sky News took the video down after its 3 million odd views, which is a big chunk of change from YouTube coming Sky News way. And Sky News took the video down after it had been seen fairly widely. All right. We are running late, Jack. I'm sorry for that. Probably down to me. Sports, the Lions tour, absolute godsend for rugby in this country. And not just that, Jack. It looks like the Wallabies have emerged with a bit of a future.
It's the best fortnight for the Wallabies in a very, very long time. They were terrific. I mean, really, not just because they very nearly won the second game and did win the third one, but they played the sort of rugby that it's going to attract Australian fans back into watching on television and turning up in person. It just looked right.
Look, that's well said. And we have the World Cup next year, Jack?
27, I think it is, actually.
Oh, it's 2020. I thought it was next year.
Yeah.
Okay, so, yes, well, that's sort of a fair way off for the Wallabies to get a few things wrong in the meantime. Hopefully they won't.
Yeah, but people will be forgiven if they come out and get smashed in the rugby championship. What they've seen, they've actually seen the future, you know?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a sign of that. It was a great win. In cricket, the England...
Cracking test match.
Oh, magnificent. In fact, I'd watched... I'd been up, I'd had to interview a bloke in New York, so I'd been up at a fairly odd hour, and I was too tired to flick the cricket on. I woke up about an hour later and checked the score, and England, I think, was still 4 down. Brooke and Root had hundreds, and it looked like they were cruising. I think they only needed about 70 or 80 more.
They did.
Then I just forgot about it, and I did not realise they were 6 for overnight and batting in the gloom in the fourth day's play.
Yeah.
And then we get to the 5th day, and I thought, 6 for, they should be all right. I received a text from a mate, said, flick on the telly, it's all happening. So we did watch it, and they fell short. Look, first thing, Mohammad Siraj, well done. What a spell. What a spell of bowling. And he's I think the only quick from either side who played in all 5 tests and bowled in them. Wokes might be the other, but he ended up getting a bit messed up with his shoulder.
He only played the 4 tests.
Okay, there you go. So I look, there may have been another bowler who bowled all 5. I don't think so. And Siraj, that last spell of his, he looked as fresh as a daisy. His father was an auto rickshaw driver. He's literally come from nothing, and he's a great cricketer, and a real fighter. Michael Vaughan said England panicked, and it's hard not to agree with that.
Yeah, when they set off on the chase, I was talking to some English friends, and I said, I think this is entirely gettable. There doesn't seem to be any great demons in the pitch. This is with the day and a half to go.
The pitch had flattened out.
Yeah, and it looked all gettable. And indeed, when Brooke and Root were together, they were cruising, and then they've just made a mess of the last bit of it.
Yeah, but having said that, big chase. If you get to 6, 7 down, it's always going to be very, very difficult. It's sort of... But
even on the last morning, Smith and Atkinson have both got test hundreds. These people are not Glenn McGrath. They are not bunnies, right?
But it's pressure, mate. It's just pressure, and you're looking at it. You need 35. What are you going to do? Bazballs dictates that you should just go bang, right? Particularly in a 6 down, just go bang, 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 try and knock it, get it down to about 10 runs, and you break the back of it. They sort of struggle. But look, again, Mohamed Siraj just bowled beautifully. And he was getting a hoop around, and he was basically bowling at the stumps most of the time. So well done to India, 2-2 and of course this sort of takes us now to the Ashes, beginning November. I noticed Dave Warner gave just the England side a little bit of a touch up, so just reminding everyone that Joe Root hasn't made 100 in Australia, and suggesting that he would be having nightmares about facing Josh Hazlewood. And I've got to say, Jack, perhaps with the exception of Joe Root, every one of the English batters, including Harry Brook, throw their hands hard at the ball. And I'll tell you how to get Zach Crawley out. You just bowl a 5th or 6th stump line, bang, 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 all the time. He will get out nicking, and then you'll open them up. And Pope, I just don't see a lot of value there. And then once you've got Root and Brook early at the crease, that's obviously got to be the plan. I just reckon Australia's going to really do some damage to the English this time around.
Well, Ricky Ponting doesn't agree with you.
Oh well, he gave very guarded stuff. He said if Jofra Archer bowls and if Mark Wood bowls, and that means all 5 tests. Then Australia's got some problems.
Well, I watched the interview, and he thought England batting was very good, and he gave them all a pass actually. And he thinks that Bazball's always been about building a team that could win in Australia, and he thinks they've gone about it very, very well. I'm inclined to agree with them.
I see a lot of problems. I see a lot of technical problems. I see huge problems around Zach Crawley. Right, this is a bloke who averages 31 in tests.
Yeah,
and I thought India bowled too close to the stumps to him, where he's be able to work the ball through the onside. What you want to do, 5th or 6th off stump line, pitch away. He will nick. He will get out nicking. I'm a bit of a fan. Wasn't for a long time of his opening partner. Because I think he's just got an excellent hand and eye coordination. But again, it's going to be harder out here. They're playing Perth first up, and then I think they move over to Gabba after that. So, it's not going to be easy for them. A lot of it will come down to their bowling attack. But if they come to Australia with a medium-paced attack, they'll get smashed. If they do have Archer and Wood playing enough, they will put enough pressure on Australia's batters.
Yeah. What about Bazball? It's immensely entertaining, but do they win often enough?
Well, Steve Smith said that he noticed a change in the England 11's approach, and that was that they were working to get themselves in winning positions more and more. They certainly did so in the third test at Old Trafford. Getting 600 and giving India a huge chase. I don't know that Bazball's really a thing. I think it's kind of almost a media obsession. They do have the 2 opening batters who play high risk games and get them off to a good start. Then when I see blokes like Root and Brook, I don't see this sort of mad run for runs, mad scatter for runs. I just think that if you can open them up, knock over the first 2 or 3 pretty easily, and that's the way. When you look at them, they just throw their hands too hard at the ball. We'll see anyway, not for a little while. In the AFL, Jack, Simon Goodwin, Melbourne coach, the only living Melbourne coach to have coached a premiership at the D's, got the flick the other night.
A winning record in 56 or something like that, 57%?
Yeah, well, Michael Voss is about 52, and there's some talk that he might be getting his marching orders fairly soon. I hope not. I think Carlton have got enough should have enough to know the Melbourne are doing this, and it just doesn't make any sense. The bloke who actually sacked him, he's going to get sacked himself, a former Melbourne player. Brad Gray, is it, Jack?
Brad Green. Brad Green's, they've already elected the next president. Brad Green's a temporary president until the other bloke arrives back from a year's holiday in Europe. So the whole place looks a shambles to me at Melbourne.
I can't understand why they would do it. Obviously, sacking a coach now with, I think, 3 rounds to play means, I guess, that you've got the options of all the available players, of all the available potential coaches.
Well, it
beyond
sends
that, I don't understand it.
It sends a clear message to the other potential candidates, hey, we've got a vacancy. So I can understand why you do it now rather than wait 3 games. Got no problem with that. But the place looks a bit of a shambles. You've got a temporary CEO, you've got a temporary president, You actually need stability to build a footy club. You need, the right.
Going to be
people,
some major list changes there, I would think, with some of their premiership players. I would think being on the market, and probably Carlton have got those issues as well. Collingwood having a few stumbles, mate. A bit early for the Collywobbles, but they've lost some close games in recent times, and by gee, Adelaide look good. And I hadn't taken them seriously until about 5 or 6 rounds ago when I saw them just tear. I think it was Carlton apart, and then someone else just ripped into them. They're beating everybody by the length of the straitjack. They almost deserve to be premiership favourites, don't they? Adelaide.
Well, I think that I'm not sure what the bookmakers say, but they probably are at the moment.
I think they'll be pretty close. Yeah, geez, they got some weapons up forward, don't they?
If we needed reminding, we got it last year. They don't hand out the flag in June. You can be going really, really well in June, and you don't win.
It's interesting. And in the NRL, very briefly, Penrith Panthers are still on strong, and causing more than a few problems for the sides in the finals. They've got finals coming up very, very soon, Jack.
Yeah, I'm just on AFL. The Swans appointed Matt Pavlich as the new CEO this morning to take over because Tom Harley's off to the AFL.
Can I just say, Matthew Pavlich, he's probably one of the best commentators in the game. There's no sense. You get a lot of them, and they want to criticise players, over-criticise players who make mistakes and all that sort of stuff. He doesn't do that. He's always sort of just really tempered. And so, Carlton played Fremantle last week, and I just enjoyed his commentary so much.
Yeah. Well, and once again, the Swans don't leak. I think the media got hold of it about an hour and a half before they did the press conference. That's all. So,
and look, he's an excellent choice. I think he's a pretty wealthy businissman in his own right and all this sort of stuff.
He's run 2 startups as well as doing his media postcard, and he was a great player.
Impressive. He's an impressive bloke, a great footballer, as you say. All right, that takes us out, Jack, unless you've got something else you want to swing by our listeners.
Well, there's a chicken funeral at Trader Joe's in San Francisco.
Now, tell me what happened there.
All these people in black robes turned up in the frozen section at Trader Joe's with all of their gear. They had
Trader Joe's is a supermarket chain in the United States.
It is indeed. It is indeed. They had a Southeast Asian type of drum, one of those barrels with the striking thing, and they had a little. The bell and then the drum to go with it, and all this black cloth. So they placed all the black cloth over the frozen chickens, right, and prayed over the frozen chickens, which in their view had been tortured to death. Right?
Oh dear.
And they had a quite elaborate funeral in the frozen section at Trader Joe's.
Bloody good thing they didn't get anywhere near the beef, Jack.
Yeah. Well, that's right.
Or the pork. Okay. Chicken funerals.
I don't know whether you've ever seen, there's a fellow who I quite like watching, a bloke called Scott Jennings. He's a Kentucky Republican, but he goes on CNN on, what's her name, Abby Phillips' show, and he gets on with everybody. Van Jones is on there with him all the time. And Van Jones says, well, in the ad breaks, he's always asking you how your family are going, all that stuff. He says, "It's a terrific fella, but I don't agree with him about anything." But they do this thing where Abby Phillips will say, "Well, if you had power, what would you do? If you were, if you were the dictator for the day." And his response is, he says, "Well, we've got a problem with our birth rate. And if you give me power, what I'll do is take all the fluoride out of the water and put Ozempic in instead."
Yes.
And he says there'll be so much nookie going on, the birth rate problems will disappear overnight.
All everybody will
be
while their teeth are falling out. All right. Okay. Well, that does take us out. We're very, very over time today, and that is probably my fault by breaking that news of MECFS, but I hope it's of some value to you all, listeners. And we did enjoy actually bringing a reader's or listener's comment in, so feel free to pass those on. You know how to get hold of us now, so I'm not even going to say it. And we'll be back together next week with episode 123 of The Two Jacks. And until then, we'll see you later, folks. Bye.
Bye.